Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for joining me for number 5 of a hopefully long series of NHS whistleblowers on what I've called Breaking the Silence, the Conversations. It's a little bit different to what you'd see on other podcasts. It's very raw in the kids' playroom and office, surrounded by kids' toys, no fancy audio, dodgy lighting. But
Same
that's what
here.
I want it to be. I want it to be informal and to have a relaxed conversation. So it delights me to introduce you all to Mike Potts. Mike Potts is a registered mental health nurse, senior, was involved in NHS management up until around about 2012, and then sort of ventured into the private sector after 27 years of NHS experience, generally working around in his later years, Southwest, doing work around care agencies and other things that Mike, I'm sure, will tell you about. But mainly his NHS work was conducted around South London, Surrey area, and some work up in the northwest, was it northeast?
Northeast.
Northeast. So with no further ado, I'd like to thank Mike for joining us. Welcome to the podcast /
My
conversation.
pleasure. Yeah, welcome. And pleasure to meet you and see you, David.
Yeah, it's good to connect. Good to connect.
Yeah.
So really just want to go through the journey of your career,
Yeah.
if that's okay.
Right.
It's hard to summarize a career, isn't it, when it's gone on for so long? But firstly, let's focus on why did you want to become a registered mental health nurse? That's not a loaded question.
Well, yeah, by chance, really. I wasn't. I was actually. I moved to London when I was 18 from Middlesbrough, and I blagged my way into an insurance underwriter's office, and I wasn't very good at it. And even back in 1986, I was getting £15 an hour, which I thought was incredible for an 18-year-old. But eventually I was discovered as somebody that couldn't do the job, and I was dismissed from that post. And I was at a loose end, and I walked past a job centre in Croydon, and they were looking for student nurses for Croydon Health Authority, and I thought, yeah, sounds about right for me. You get accommodation, you get a salary, all thrown in, can't be bad. So it kind of went from there, really. But yeah, so I trained in Croydon Health Authority, and which was at one point merged into SLAM, which is a South London and Maudsley NHS Trust, and I worked for SLAM for 20 years, and I did 13 years in clinical nurse management. And I left the NHS, like you said, about 2012, last substantive post as a staff nurse. I was a manager, senior charge nurse at one point, ward manager.
So,
And I went
I
into
was just going to say, if you split this bit of the conversation into pre-COVID and post-COVID, we'll sort of focus on the post-COVID after. But over your sort of spanning 27 NHS years, how would you have described that journey? Did you see improvements in services?
No, absolutely not. And I think that like I said, I started in 1987, so it was a different time. It was a different reality. It was a different era. Everything, you can't really compare the two, really. I don't think today. But I just thought things went progressively worse in about 96, 97, which coincided with the new Labour government, Tony Blair and his gang, when everything management became top heavy, people were micromanaged. It was all about targets and meeting unrealistic expectations. The sense of job security was no longer there. That seemed to have vanished, and you're only one mistake away from a dismissal and a referral to the NMC or the UKCC, what it used to be. Yeah, so it got more aggressive, the management and the style and the administration. It just become unpleasant, really. And it had a good. Me personally, I had a good maybe 10 years in the NHS, and the rest of it was more of a struggle, really.
Do you think it's mainly around that, like you've just mentioned, the management, like the patient-centered care has now become to
Yeah, I mean,
yeah,
and it's psychiatry as well, bearing that in mind. So it's wherever you want it to be, really, isn't it? Psychiatry, it's wherever it is, wherever somebody says it is. And the fact that I used to try and the service needs were more important than the patient needs. The patients had to work around the needs of the service as opposed to the service working on the needs of the patient. And I was always kind of hands-on, client-centered, if you like. I didn't like going to meetings. I didn't like going on unnecessary courses or training and all that nonsense. I just like to be on the ward or in the hospital, and that become increasingly difficult. That you wanted to, move you away from that and corral you into a different direction, and it just become very negative environment, very hostile, and there was a lot of bullying was endemic. You just couldn't. You, being able to speak your mind and protest and say, look, make a general kind of remark of concern, it was just frowned upon. I just became a troublemaker overnight.
Well, that's what I was going to ask you next, really. So obviously, I've said in previous conversations this week that whistleblowing is promoted.
Yeah,
freedom of
it's
speech,
not.
guardianship is promoted.
I had whistleblowing is just it's a way of actually identifying troublemakers, because I had a compromise agreement for one particular post that from an NHS trust. They give me a reference and a payment, and just to be quiet. And they don't do those anymore now. Apparently, they've stopped doing all that stuff. But yeah, once you are a whistleblower, you become a target. And
it doesn't need to necessarily be big stuff, like you say. It can just be small things you'd fill in. I mean, they make the forms deliberately difficult, don't they? If there's an incident, you have to fill in a form. I forgot what the name of the form is now, but it's deliberate that it takes about 2.5 hours to do it. And so, even on the case by case clinical concerns that you may see, they get lost in the ether of bureaucracy. And then, like you say, micromanaging. My experience in A&E as an A&E doctor was always get the patient decided upon within 4 hours. Now, sometimes you would only pick up the notes at 3 hours 50, and you'd have a matron sat there with a computer screen watching that the patient's going to breach, because it's going to cost the trust. So they're pushing you for an answer to admit or to discharge after you haven't even touched the patient, let alone ask them a question. So it very much became, and it used to drive me nuts. Patients breaching, I was like, I don't care. I'm going to go and see them, take the history, examine them, and see. So you need to admit them then to the medics. Well, how am I going to when I've got no history? So as you mentioned, that kind of sort of confirms really that management and figures,
just target-driven nonsense.
Finance. So what sort of feathers did you ruffle pre-COVID? What sort of things? I mean, in general terms, I don't need to get into
a lot of feathers.
What were these concerns you were bringing to the table? Were they patient concerns? Were they systemic concerns?
Yeah, I mean, there was. I was pretty much so. Yeah, I mean, I was back in 2006. I was involved in a story, as it were, for the Sunday People. That rag, and I was involved in a 3-page story which involved the front page and 2 pages inside. And that was after I left the trust that I was with, and they wouldn't listen to my concerns formally, so I went publicly. But the newspaper actually didn't publish the story because they went to the High Court, and the NHS Trust wanted to know the source of the information. And obviously it was me. And one of the things they didn't do at the time was, they protected their sources, so the story didn't run. But yeah, I was always a bit of a thorn in the flesh, really. And I didn't feel, I felt comfortable in the job that I was doing, but all the other kind of unimportant, incidental things I had to do as part of my role, none of it really made a lot of sense, really. It was just, I just felt I was being controlled a lot of the time.
But the focal point of your concerns come from, they're not coming from a motivated place of money or anything.
I've got nothing to gain from it. I've got everything to lose and nothing to gain. I've got nothing to gain from this conversation, really. I've got nothing to gain from my stance with COVID. I lost everything essentially because of my stance during COVID. I went through 5 jobs, and in quick succession because I refused to comply. And
it's probably a good time to start that story then. Now,
yeah, I mean, that's that's my history is exactly what it is, history, and the memory is a funny thing as well, isn't it? But yeah, I can think that far back, but but yeah, the thing that's my current concerns, it's ongoing concern, is the whole COVID issue. Yeah.
So
It
how did
hasn't
it
been.
start? So what was your starting point? So you're merrily working. You're not doing
Yeah,
mental health then. You're doing private sector stuff in care
yeah, working in care
management.
homes, just providing basic nursing care, really, which is not difficult, is it? I mean, I
Yeah.
don't know why they train for 3 years. You can do it in 3 weeks.
But you've got this wider lens now. So you've got your background in the NHS, seen it
Yeah.
deteriorate, and
Oh yeah.
you know what
Oh yeah.
NHS systems are like and how they were ripe for
And I
this
know what
pandemic.
private health care systems are as well. Equally so. How they're kind of flawed.
What was your first beef with this COVID? I nearly called it the scamdemic. You,
The scandemic, yeah. Well, my first beef was when I went to work and somebody wanted to take my temperature, and I thought, well, I'm got a temperature. I'm got, I think if I had a temperature, I wouldn't be at work. I'd be at home, wouldn't I? And the PPE situation, where the masking, of course, which was I find abhorrent. That's basically when my line was being crossed. All my life, I've never knowingly had the government come into my living room and mess with me, as it were. And I felt this was very personal. This was overreach, as it were. And I thought, well, I'm not going to come. I just said, look, as far as I can see, there's nothing novel, there's nothing unique, there's nothing to worry about, and why not just continue as we are? But you know, uh, I just didn't buy any of it. It was clearly propaganda. It was clearly lies. I mean, I'm not sure what people need. I don't watch TV as a rule, and that's probably helps. And I'm highly skeptical, and I'm a contrarian by nature. And I just didn't buy any of it. And I thought, well, I'm not going to buy into this nonsense. So I'm going to. This is what I'm prepared to do. This is what I'm not prepared to do, and I stuck with it.
Well, I
You
think
know.
you just nailed it in one of the things you just said there. You haven't got a TV. that
No, we don't watch
that
TV.
would
No.
have given you the flip side, because I was working in these primary care settings and seeing empty spaces and TikTok dances and all the rest of it, and then
Mm,
going home to the BBC seeing hazmat
yeah.
wearing, goggle imprinted, and apparently drained. Well, I nearly said actors.
Yeah.
The crisis
Well,
actors used.
it was cosplay, really, wasn't it? I mean, it was just nonsense, and it was like I said, I didn't feel comfortable with any of it, and I didn't feel it was necessary. But even so, there was a tremendous pressure and push on staff working in these areas to comply with it, which I didn't. And at the beginning of it, they were quite, they weren't really concerned about the masks situation, and it was kind of like there was kind of they're quite easy on it, but it got worse and progressively worse as time went on. This 3 weeks to flatten the curve. I knew, that once people acquiesced to that, it wasn't going to be 3 weeks, was it? It was like 2 years of abject misery,
Mm.
and nothing's been normal, whatever that means, since. So yeah, I mean, then my my I mean. Uh, Obviously, I worked in multiple locations in Southeast Wales, but I saw the same thing wherever I went. When it hit March and April 2020, every care home I was going in, there was the majority of the patients were being put on end of life care, and I thought, well, what's the basis for this? Most of it was on the strength of a bogus test, the PCR test. The polymerized chain reaction, whatever you want to call that.
So
That
let's
sounds
dig into that. So you were seeing it like across the board, wherever you work, that there was this kind of, would you say gung-ho, premature,
yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
overzealous use of.
everybody had a blanket DNR form. Everybody, regardless of who they were, what the condition was,
And
and that was.
were the discussions had capacity or not capacity assessed? Were
I
relatives
don't think that was
involved?
that wasn't an issue. I don't think that was the case. I think it just happened. It just happened, and the elderly were basically the most vulnerable people. Essentially, they were the relatives and families were locked out in terms of visiting and expressing concerns and actually seeing what was happening. I attended a care home in Bridgend in probably April 2020, and I did a night shift there, and the whole home was basically evacuated in terms of the staff. There was no staff there. People were walking out during the handover because they'd heard 6 residents were positive for this nonsense and that nonsense. And I was left alone with a carer in a 50-bedded unit. And I went into 2 rooms, and there was 2 deceased residents, and they didn't even hand it over. you know, and
just lying in state.
yeah, 2 dead bodies, yeah, attached to a T-34 syringe driver. It wasn't even handed over, you know, and it was just it was horrendous. It was horrific, and I had the occasion of having a couple of conversations with nursing colleagues. 2 of them specifically were on board with what I was saying, but none of them were prepared to just say, look, and stand up and speak out, not even address it to their line manager. I had the same kind of blanket excuse. Well, I've got bills to pay. I can't get involved. We know it's bullshit, but we're not going to do anything about it.
Happy to press go on the syringe driver?
Yeah, well, yeah, I didn't. Well, the syringe drivers were being pretty much set up by district nurses and Macmillan nurses, because none of the home nurses were competent or confident to actually do it. We'd all had some training. We had this syringe driver awareness as opposed to training, because training means they've taught you something, and if something goes wrong, they might be liable for it. But once you've done your training, you're immediately out of date unless you use it. So I wasn't using syringe drivers per se, but I was monitoring them, but they were being set up by the district nurses. I never saw the district nurses. They kind of came in, and they came in and went, just like they ghosted in and ghosted out. And you know, I mean, to be honest with you, I mean, it's not a pleasant way to expire. You know, it's not a quick method to end life. You know, you're stuck on these machines maybe for 12 hours or more, you know, drowning in your own secretions and suffocating. Can't be a nice way of, you know. So, I mean, yeah, I mean, so I saw a lot of that, too much of it. And I thought, this is ridiculous. And I was in a home just outside of Newport on a Saturday morning, and the Public Health of Wales were phoning every day, wanting updates about how many residents are positive for COVID and how many. And I said on one occasion, I said, it's a bit of a strange time to ring on a Saturday morning. And she said, yeah, well, I normally speak to the manager. Is the manager there? I said, she's not here. She said, how many of your residents have tested positive for COVID-19 this week? And I said, actually, nobody. And she said, yet. I thought, oh, that's a nice reply. Instead of saying, oh, that's a good, isn't it, Mike? That's, you know, nobody's positive and that's fine. She said, yet, as in it will happen. You know, it's going to, you know. So I thought their attitude was pretty malicious. You know, I worked in a place and another place where Public Health Wales had come, they did a spot check at midnight, looking through windows and reported staff. I was working there. They reported staff to the police for not wearing masks. It's madness. It's nuts. I couldn't get my head around it.
It is mad.
The same care home, the home nurse who did the handover and orientated me to the unit, went to the clinic room. There was a box of midazolam. She said, there's some midazolam there. Don't be afraid to use it. I said, pardon? It was just stored under a sink. The boxes of midazolam, no names on it, you know, straight from the manufacturer. I was told to use it if you think I should use it. I thought, well, I don't need to. What am I going to use midazolam for?
What a sinister comment, though. Use it if you need to.
Use it if I need to, yeah, basically. So I didn't, you know. Then it was just a very strange, and I found that a lot of like I say, when I started raising concerns about what was going on, my voice wasn't heard. You know, I went to my agency management, and they said they appreciated what I was saying, and they actually understood to a point, but they weren't prepared to do anything about it because it was business. They've got clients to please and to cover. Yeah, so it got progressively worse. My agency dropped me. Both agencies dropped me because of I was being sent away from assignments because I was raising questions. I was refusing the protocols. You know, I wasn't wearing masks. I wasn't testing. I wasn't taking my temperature. I was going, this is me. If you don't like it, fine. If you don't want me to work here, fine. So that happened on about 6 occasions. But I did tell them, the agency, look, to tell them in advance what I'm prepared to do. I think sometimes they didn't, hoping I'd just comply, which I didn't. I wouldn't comply with that. You know, I'd rather starve than, you know, to actually adhere to those abominations, you know. What? So this went on and on and on. And I reported my concerns to the RCN. They basically put the phone down on me. The NMC, They wouldn't listen to me on the phone. They're just, all the NMC are interested in is reporting nurses and midwives. You know, you phone the NMC, the first thing they say, press 1 if you want to report a nurse or midwife, you know. Charming. You know, they basically gaslighted me. I made a report, a statement to a solicitor, Broad Yorkshire Law, Lois Bayliss, I believe her name was. And that was part of the bundle that went to Hammersmith Police Station, courtesy of Mark Sexton. That wasn't actioned, of course. I went to my local politician at the time, Ruth Jones, and she said I need to go to the General Synod, the Synod in Wales, the Welsh government, which I did. I reported my concerns to them. They got back to me 2 years later, asking me for details. And when I give the details, I got no response. They wanted to discuss it with me and talk about it, my experiences, my observations. But when I actually give them the meat of the details, they suddenly went cold. No, I'm sorry, we don't want to speak to you anymore. We don't want to talk about Matthew Synersia. We don't want to talk about scams and this and that, or, you know, leaky, dangerous vaccines. We don't want to discuss that.
We're only interested in social media posts of midwives.
Yeah, we're just interested in blind compliance, you know, and just we're all in this together. Well, we're not actually. We're not all in this together. But I'm still speaking as a minority, I think, in my profession or just generally. I think people have just they've forgotten about it or just don't want to talk about it. It's like, to me, it's kind of still real and it's still painful and it's still kind of, it's kind of like I can't see any kind of closure on this really, because all the agencies involved in flagging this are all being captured, haven't they? So what do we do? Where do you go with this? You know, I mean, and it's still happening. You know, I mean,
left, right, and centre. It's pecuniary interest. It's the old Reddies. That's what's important. Like you say, these private healthcare agencies. It's all about profits. They're private enterprises. NHS. Yeah. It's all about management targets and pharmaceutical payouts.
And during this period, they also did these. I was offered 2 payments, one-off payments. I was offered these payments, and I thought, well, what's that all about? And there was a tax-free social care payment, and they offered it to me twice, and I refused it twice because I thought, well, if I take anything from these people, it means I've accepted what's happening, and you know, I'm part of the problem. You
what do you think those payments were, Mike? Do you think they were silencing bribes or what?
There were parachute payments so for essential workers. It was something like the region of £700 or £800 in each episode, each occasion. And I thought, well, I'm not taking this because it sounds it's kind of a small bribe, really. And it's like, well, if I take this money, I'm part. You know, I agreed to the terms and conditions of what's happening, so I didn't take it. I'm not sure where the money came from, but people, obviously, a lot of people did take it. You know, and it is a kind of form of bribery, keeping people a bit sweet, and it's also it's a sign of like, well, you know, you don't complain. You took the money, didn't you? Even if it was just £800, you took it, so you agreed. You know, I just didn't want any part of it, really. The whole thing was a travesty. And the abuse I took, you know, the abuse I took wasn't online, but it was more face to face as well. You know, these people just completely, I don't know, I mean, lost their minds, isn't it? I mean, I just saw kind of like a global psychosis, you know, creeping across the world, and I think it's still here. It hasn't completely gone. You know, it doesn't take long for somebody to go crazy, but it takes a long time to resolve it. And you know, they talk about mass formation and fear-based mind control, and pretty much that's what it was, wasn't it? I mean, the majority of the population weren't particularly thinking rationally; they were thinking emotionally, and that's where the problem was. You know, the propaganda was tailored for you to generate an emotional response instead of a critical kind of response.
And like you say, the people say who've got 2 masks on and a visor and they've had the jabs, you know, they're protected from their safe and effective intervention. So what's Mike Potts's vaccine status or mask wearing status got to do with anyone? But you get this visceral response, the anger. They're not just each to their own. They're like angry and aggressive.
I guess that's what they call the cognitive dissonance, isn't it? It's when you know, it's like my paradigm shift, my kind of view of reality and how things work shifted. It felt uncomfortable, but I didn't get angry with anybody. it's like I accepted it, you know. But mine was like, that was this awakening. I was a kind of awake to a lot of things throughout my life, but I just couldn't put my finger on it, what it was, you know.
Mm.
But yeah, there is you still get that, and there's people of, you know, it broke families, communities, friendships, relationships. But I think that's all part of it, isn't it? That's what they wanted.
Yeah,
This
division,
causes
division,
fracture, this
division.
divide, this division. It's, you know, as long as we're kind of divided and fractious and arguing amongst ourselves, the people, that the powers that shouldn't be, regain control or keep control. But I was never sick. I didn't. It's ironic. It's quite funny, isn't it? The COVID itself, the symptom profile is something we're all familiar with, isn't it? It's not as if your nose went blue or your ears fell off. It's like
Yeah.
something we can all. So it wasn't that novel, was it?
I know
So
it
it's
kept
something
changing,
we
didn't
can
it? It
all,
kept changing.
yeah, we can all relate to it because we've all had it at some point, you know. So it wasn't so. Yeah, it kept obviously kept changing, didn't it? You know, and it is. You know, I've had nurses come up to me and said, "Did you see that patient? Said he had the COVID face." I said, "What are you talking about? What's the COVID face?" Or he had COVID toe. Or there was
COVID.
a flesh. At one point, there was flesh eating COVID. I thought, what's going on? I'm sorry, excuse me. I'm not at home to Mr. Nut. I mean, what's going on here? And on one occasion, I caught one of my colleagues, a nursing colleague, swabbing the mouth of a deceased client resident. I said, "What are you doing?" "I'm taking a swab." "Why?" No answer. And a lot of these people, when you they blindly do something, but when you question them and they're completely, they've got no answer, they've got no
Mm.
rebuttal, they just fall apart. You know, it's like they were working in some kind of, we work on a different plane. I think, I don't know. It's just weird. You know,
Yeah.
it's like, can't you see what I see?
Yeah.
No, no. Majority obviously didn't. You know, so I'm thinking, well, I could be maybe it's me. You know, maybe I'm crazy or I missed the point, but I don't think it is. You know, there's enough kind of supporting evidence to suggest that I'm not crazy. Or yeah, there is cause for concern, but we're 5 years down the line and nothing's been addressed. Nobody's been hauled to court. Nobody's been held accountable, and they're still promoting these vaccinations. They're still doubling down on that. So I don't, and there's so many people involved in it, you know, at every level. Who are you going to prosecute? You
But it's
know,
not as if like they're let's put it behind us. And there's this duty of candor that I wrote a Substack on about, it's a duty, it's not a choice. But they're not the brave people like me and my other COVID dissenters. We're being put through the ringer through these long drawn out. My process is 3 years now. Other people have been
yeah.
struck off. What are they doing? Persecuting those who spoke
Well,
out?
isn't the process the punishment? I
Yeah.
had a similar experience with the NMC. Back in 2010, I had a full hearing in the Strand. You know, I had a full substantive hearing in the Strand, and nothing came of it. But it took
What were your
2 years.
crimes? What were your crimes committed for that? If you
That
don't
was
have to
when,
say.
well, absolutely, it was nothing. It was just I was in a very unpleasant kind of working environment in the northeast of England, in a hospital that shall remain nameless, Rosebery Park Hospital. And I was working in a medium secure unit. It was a very kind of incestuous, bullying environment. I kind of raised concerns. I actually resigned, you know, because of it. But they weren't happy with my resignation. They wanted to kind of pursue me. You know, they made erroneous complaints about me, and it went to the NMC, and I had a full hearing. So yeah, I know and I find it helpful just going there really, right, and say, look, I had nothing to lose really, but yeah, but the whole thing is just it's disabling. It's you know, you got to, every time you go for a job, you got to say, well, yeah, I'm actually under investigation, but it's taken like next 30 years to sort out, so it can give me a break. You know, there's no agency whatsoever in these processes. Yeah, so I found that very, like I said, I was happy to go through with the whole process just to see what it was like, and it was like I said, I was cleared of any wrongdoing. But yeah,
At the time you were cleared for a while, I'm presuming a period of time that it took to
mm,
process things. That your
yeah,
name, a bit like mine is when you Google me now, your
yeah,
name was, for whatever charges they were, listed based upon allegations, unheard
yeah, yeah,
allegations.
yeah, yeah. But yeah, and it also gets twisted out of, you know, uh, those allegations. you know, the reporting of it, it's not particularly factual at all, is it really? A lot of it, it's just they want to make news copy, make it interesting. So the truth is not really important, is it? Yeah, so that kind of hounded me for a little bit, but I kind of shook it off and just kind of moved on and, plowed ahead really. So I'm just like, I was never comfortable in the last 10 years in nursing. I've always tried to look to break out from it and do something else, but it's kind of a cult, isn't it? It does get its claws into you. It kind of makes you feel you can't do anything else or break out. And like I say, I'm 56 now, 57 in April. I'm not a spring chicken, So it's difficult for me, and I can see why people kind of complied with convid, because it is a very difficult decision. Shall I go along with it or not? And I do appreciate that some people had to, but unfortunately there wasn't enough people that actually made a stand, and I just felt like I was a lone voice in Southeast Wales. I felt like I was just shouting, into an abyss, and it still feels like that. You got
But even
Twitter.
even then, Mike, we're getting like taps on the shoulder from people saying, Mike, yeah, well, I've thought about it and you are right. Like private acknowledgement that you were right, or just
Nobody's acknowledged
complete
that. No,
cancellation.
nobody. No, I've not had anybody say, "Oh, by the way, Mike, you're right on that." But then again, I didn't go around uh, attempting to change people's minds. I said, well, I'll just allow people to make their own decisions. And if they asked me, they get my opinion. It's like when I was working, I wasn't talking about COVID last few years. But if people ask for my opinion, I give it, and that's when the problems occurred.
Hmm.
Because I give my opinion,
Zero
it was quite a
tolerance.
strong opinion,
Hmm.
and and it didn't go down particularly well in some quarters. And I had a few kind of very raw conversations with GPs on the phone, who brought up the subject, not me. And I told them what I thought of them, essentially.
Did
And
you get anything from them? Any sort of inkling that they were awake
no,
but couldn't speak, or felt shackled to speak, or just
no,
cultists?
yeah, no. I think they were just. I think GPs were, it's like back in 21. When I was working in the private sector, and you'd phone a GP on a clinical matter for one of the residents, and first thing the GP would say to you, "This person never seen before. Have you had your jab, Mike?" Pardon? What do you mean jab? What's a jab? Is that a punch in the arm or a punch in the face? At the first, they were pushed. So the next GP I phoned on another clinical issue. The first thing they said to me is, "Oh, have you had your jab, Mike?" I said, "I'm not here to discuss jabs. I'm here to discuss this resident's clinical condition and my concerns. So what are you talking about?" So I was particularly rude to one GP, but a lot of them just put the phone down, But I mean, since when does what gives them the authority, to I mean, I'd be embarrassed. I was embarrassed with them, actually.
Well, it was a shameless push, wasn't it? I mean, I see people who get. I mean, you get the text message. Fair enough.
Cringe.
You're gonna let people know they're eligible for these things, and
Well,
obviously provide some informed consent, which didn't happen, as we know. That's another conversation. But people have
yeah,
had incessant daily messages, sometimes twice a day, for each
yeah,
booster that's come in, and it's all for what? £10 a pop. I mean,
yeah.
really, is
Your
that
life,
what they're
yeah.
sold the souls
Well,
for?
yeah, I just don't. I mean, I wasn't going to buy into it. And I mean, fact is that, I don't believe there's such a thing as COVID. So if there isn't such a thing as COVID, what the hell's in those injections?
Well,
You
we'll come
know.
to that. So I've got a few sort of quick fire questions I was going to ask you. Jabs is one of them, but we'll start with lockdown.
Mm,
What's your gut feeling, experience of lockdown? What did you think of it from an
horrific.
NHS perspective rather than a member of the public?
Sorry,
Or,
David.
or from a healthcare perspective, or when you
From a healthcare perspective, yeah.
what did you see? What did you witness? What were your
It
thoughts?
was just horrific and unnecessary. You know. Um, I felt like it was part. It didn't feel. It felt quite. I don't know. Like I say, I just discussing with my brothers and family, and my brother was convinced it was a kind of global communist coup, and I think it wasn't far off the mark, actually.
Hmm.
Um, I just find it. I just felt very disappointed, really, and the fact that the lack of how people just went with it in healthcare. I was just very depressing, and I struggled with it throughout the whole time. And I tried to reason with people when I had to reason with people, but it just nothing really there was no resonance, there was no kind of understanding, there was no kind of, well, what do you think? I mean, what's the chances of this being a scam or not? Doesn't want to know. They just went with it. I mean, I was at one care home and I was having a break and I was standing outside the entrance having a cigarette, no mask or whatever, just chilling out with a coffee and a fag, and the GP turned up in almost a full containment suit. I mean, I didn't know whether to laugh or cry, really.
They must look back at that and think just ludicrous.
Well,
Because
it's just
they'd
I was
then go back
embarrassed.
to, but they'd go
I
back
mean,
to the surgery, type up the notes of the patient they've just been out to, and they'd be sat around the staff room with nurses, doctors,
yeah,
cleaners without masks on.
yeah.
So it just didn't make
I
nothing
found the mask
correlated.
situation particularly abhorrent, to be honest with you. I mean, that was, and that, going out in public, I never wore one in shops, and I had one altercation in my local co-op. It could have gone a bit unpleasant, but it didn't. But yeah, I thought, well, this is it. But I thought, well, I just looked around me. I thought everybody's wearing these damn masks. I said, why is everybody in fancy dress? Why are they wearing these surgical splash guards to go shopping? It just didn't make sense to me. I just thought, well, people are just fucking stupid. I mean, what is it? I mean, it's just the herd mentality, I presume. I've never ran with the pack. That's another thing. I've always been a bit of a solitary character. I've always felt uncomfortable in large groups of people, or like I used to love football, but I went off it some years ago, and I always felt uncomfortable in crowds. It just I don't know where it was. I think it was just fear, indoctrination, propaganda. Uh, People just want to appear to be normal, don't they? Want to fit in. They're frightened about appearing to be, not part of the pack, as it were. I don't know. It's just
Very,
it
very
learned,
strange
learned
rules, weren't there? I mean, you could go
just
to the pub,
nonsense,
but only if
learned
you had a
behaviour.
substantial meal. So you get told if you had a pint in your hand, you'd have to get out. And then
Yeah,
there was that Scotch egg gate, wasn't there? Where if you had a Scotch egg, that was a meal, but then people were arguing it wasn't substantive,
yeah.
so you'd
I
serve a
mean,
salad with it.
yeah. I
Or
mean,
if you sat down and ate a steak, you were
yeah,
okay. Walking through the concourse, you'd have to put a
yeah,
mask on as you
yeah,
go to
yeah,
the
yeah.
restaurant.
But nobody's questioning this, which I found alarming. Just how people can be so easily manipulated and fooled into that type of behavior. I just don't get it, really. I still find it very troubling, and I still find it very difficult to actually get my head around the whole thing. It's like a form of trauma, really. I feel kind of traumatized by
You'd
it.
hope in 2025 people will at least look back and think that was a load of nonsense. The bubbles of 6 and the 2 meter rule they've already admitted. And you look back on some of the things that people
Yeah.
did. You're allowed an hour out to exercise, if I remember correctly. And
Well, yeah, I mean, like I said, but I never really adhered to those kind of protocols, those requests. I wasn't locked down under any circumstances. The only thing is, I didn't travel, and I did quite a bit of traveling before. My partner's from Slovakia, and my last trip overseas was February 2020. Surprise, surprise! I haven't been anywhere since. So yeah, I guess that if they didn't want you to travel anytime soon, I guess it worked on me, because my wanderlust, my desire to travel is non-existent. I've got no desire to go into any other territory. I'd like to leave this country at some point pretty soon. A couple of years time, maybe, when my son finishes college, and we plan to retire to Slovakia. But
yeah.
in the meantime, I'm in this horrible Marxist shithole called Great Britain.
Did you
I just like,
experience? Did you experience any? We talked a bit about lockdown, and I've heard
hmm,
stories even this morning about some lockdown cruelty. But did you ever see inhumane cruelty in your
yeah,
experience?
yeah, yeah,
Is there any
yeah,
cases that sort of jump out to your mind of anything that you saw?
quite
So
a bit
it's a deep one, that.
Yeah,
Just
yeah.
in
I mean,
general terms, maybe.
sorry, David.
Just in general terms, if no specific.
Yeah, just the general neglect of uh, humans, individuals. I mean, they were all hiding behind nice guidelines, weren't they? And I think because they're hiding behind nice guidelines, they can get away with it. And it's not the case, is it? Because they operated with impunity because they thought, well, these guidelines is, and you're not doing the right thing. There's a difference between doing the right thing and doing what you're told.
Mm.
And yeah, I mean, the negligence, the casual kind of acceptance of this euthanasia program, which it was a euthanasia program, because obviously the COVID virus in March 2020 and April 2020, it was so intelligent. It just jumped on a bus and went to care homes and wreaked havoc there. And if people weren't dying of COVID-19, what were they dying of? Well, they're dying of end of life protocols, NG163, whatever we want to call it, or the rebirthing of the Liverpool care pathway. These people, nobody died of COVID-19. In those care homes, they died of negligence, neglect, or end of or at the end of a syringe driver. Nobody died of COVID-19.
That's that whole. I mean, even in the figures, the alleged
Thousands of
figures
people
of
perished.
infection fatality rates. I mean, firstly, the people who did allegedly die of COVID or flu replaced or whatever your thoughts are on that, we'll come to tests in a minute. But people were either obese or had multiple comorbidities, and obviously, then you have a test. And I mean, this morning I've heard about cases of people who've got wee infections, fractures of their bone, and they're put on the COVID ward because they got a positive test.
The question is, how do you calibrate a test without an example of test material? I mean,
well, no, didn't they get given a genetic structure from China, and then there was never the live virus isolation and purification.
Yeah. I mean, and the lateral flow tests they were constantly in use as well. They were used. I mean, there were people addicted to those things at some point.
Well, I had a surgery that literally we had our first shipment of the lateral flows. It's all PCR in car parks until then. But then I remember getting them, and one of the senior GPs at surgery said, "These are a load of crap." That was his exact words. What a waste of plastic. What a waste of plastic. These aren't worth the plastic that they're made out of, was his exact phrase. 2 weeks later, they're mandating that you've got to, as members of staff, use them Monday and Thursday and publish your results. We were doing the zapping the temperature. I mean, even if the temperature was 39, no one would do anything about it. Or if it was 34, because you've been out in the cold, no one. So we're just doing this zapping. Whatever the number was that came off you need to zap your head, and whatever the number was, they'd ignore it. So it's just such illogical stuff. But what are your thoughts on the tests? We'll talk.
The tests are the things that underpin the whole event, wasn't it? Without those tests, they didn't have a pandemic, did they?
Yeah.
But the tests were just absolute bullshit. I mean, like I said, Kerry Mullis, the inventor of the tests, he said they're not used as a diagnostic tool. They're for laboratory use only. They weren't designed to actually to identify anything in terms of a clinical diagnosis. That wasn't the purpose of them. But they were repurposed at some point, weren't they? By the German guy Drosten or something. They were tinkered with. And I mean, the tests. I mean, they were telling me I was sick when I wasn't sick, and and all this.
That was a concept in and of itself. That one of
the biggest symptom is asymptomatic means you're well, doesn't it? I mean,
that's what I was about to say. Yeah, asymptomatic carriage, and they were basically marketing the fact that you could become a granny assassin by going into your granny, giving her a hug and a kiss without any symptoms. But one of the symptoms for the deadly disease was no symptoms. It was just.
Isn't virology based on a theory at the end of the day, isn't it? I mean, that's pretty much most of it, isn't it?
I believe in that one. That's one for another day.
At the end of the day, it's just a theory. At the end of the day, isn't it? I mean, it's nothing. But they were saying the science is settled. Science is never settled, is it? I mean, this is.
I did a science degree, and they taught you very different to the medical degree. Medical degree was this is what we do for that condition: conform, spoon feed, algorithmic learning. First degree was very much. Even if it's published, look where the money comes from. Look for conflicts of interest. Sometimes even conclusions don't match the results section. I worked in research myself, and I was being coerced. They were like, when I was finding out the control group was exactly the same or better off than the drug that they were marketing, it's like, we go back and do that account again, kind of thing. And I thought, this was really why I left science and went into medicine, hoping it would be better. But then medicine's called medicine, and it's the clues in the title. Medicine means drugs, so the whole profession's geared towards drugs and more drugs.
Absolutely, that's all there is to it, really.
This whole customer thing, it's a commercial thing. A patient cured is a customer lost.
Or the people refer to the allopathic death cult. But just straight off a bit there. I was going to say something. I've got my train of thoughts.
About tests, we're on testing.
One test, the test. So I didn't have any. Obviously, the tests were a crucial part of it, and like I said, I wasn't interested in the test whatsoever. you know, a bit of due diligence, you'd realize the tests were just bullshit anyway, you know. So why would you put yourself through that? Really, it's embarrassing.
Mm.
Um, yeah, so like I said, the tests, but they were, I was, like I said, they asked me numerous occasions to test, and I wouldn't. Well, I'm fine. I'm not sick. And the tests are actually nonsense, by the way, you know. And obviously, my
Did anyone
response.
listen to your concerns there, though, when they
No,
were saying you need to
no,
have your test because, and
no,
you say, no, this is
no.
PCR, run at a cycle threshold of 45. You know,
Yeah,
if
that's
you
what.
did
Yeah.
10 people's HIV with a PCR primer and you ran it to 45 cycles, we'd all have
Well,
HIV.
HIV, don't go. That's another thing.
Oh, I don't want to go there.
Yeah,
That's another big one.
I think they did a dry run, didn't they, with the HIV? I think.
Are you trying to say that Mr. Fauci had some involvement in
Well,
that?
I'm trying to think HIV is another kind of like fictitious virus, isn't it? You know,
I will
the only
not be
time I ever
commenting
see,
on that.
the only well, I can comment. The only time I ever saw people get sick with HIV is when I took the treatment. You know, so there you go. You know, I saw people kind of go from being healthy into nothing and die because they took combination therapy back in the 80s and
Yeah.
90s. But before that, they were asymptomatic.
Yeah. I want to
Strange, that
come
isn't
to
it?
jabs
Sounds
now.
familiar. Sounds
Yeah,
familiar.
sounds very familiar. I
Yeah.
want to come to jabs, Mike. Did anyone have the
Mm.
audacity to try and flog you a jab? And what did you say? And what was the reaction?
Oh yeah, I mean, I got, I guess I got unsolicited phone calls from the NHS. Well, Boxing Day, they're kind of leaving me a voicemail with a tremulous voice saying, "Would you like to go to your local surgery to get this and that?"
Knowing it was you.
Yeah, well, probably. I don't know. It was very odd. That was on Boxing Day. I got a voicemail. That's strange. I obviously got the kind of letters from my GP surgery, which I know I delisted myself, you know,
Mm.
a while ago. I got no why would I want to go and see a GP? No disrespect, David.
Did it stop
Um,
though? Then did it stop? You said no. You've
yeah,
refused by
pretty
not
much. Yeah,
commenting.
yeah. I ignored the letters. I ignored the phone call, and as far as I was aware, that was the only kind of attempt to coerce me into that procedure, into taking a novel medical device. But yeah, and work. I mean, the thing is that work did mention it a couple of times. You know, they were quite excited that this product had come on the market. They wanted all their staff to, you know, participate in it. And I said, no, thank you. I'm fine. I'm good. I'll leave it for 10 years and I'll get back to you. So yeah, they wanted people to be vaccinated, whatever that meant. And obviously, I lost assignments as a consequence. I didn't say because of that, but in Wales it was different in Wales because there was no pressure to have it. You know, I know lots of care workers in England, was it 40,000, 60,000 lost their jobs because they refused it. But we didn't have that mandate, which is another thing, a mandate, isn't it? A mandate to require permission. We didn't have that mandate in Wales, so there wasn't that pressure in Wales because they've only got a small kind of workforce. You know, they can't afford to lose 60,000 members of their workforce. That would be it; it'd be obliterated.
Mm.
Yeah, so there was no pressure in terms of that, but obviously there was pressure. You know, the incessant propaganda, the marketing. It was constant, 24 hours a day. I didn't watch TV, but going into care homes, everybody had the TV on. I was aware that there was this propaganda, this nonsense. But I didn't take it. It was very uncomfortable just listening to it, you know,
Mm.
tuning out, but just thinking, well, is people actually believing this? But they actually were. You know, that's the worrying thing, isn't it? But I
So,
think it's
what's your
all about.
experience, Mike, of post jab healthcare matters? What were you seeing? I mean, obviously, it's a slightly niche area that you were in the arena.
Yeah.
But you had a kind
Well,
of broad perspective.
I've got there's people I've known, worked with, friends that are no longer with us, ex-colleagues, friends that have died suddenly within the last few years. People of my age and even younger, you know,
And
suddenly
is it
the
happening to the unvaccinated that you know, or is it just people that have had this? And there was a
no,
temporal
no,
correlation.
no, there's no. Well, let's say correlation doesn't mean causation, but there is a strong correlation, isn't there? You know, and yeah, it's like it's just sometimes you know you go on like a social media. I'm a slightly kind of I don't go on it too often, but you suddenly think, well, I've not heard from that person for a while, so you kind of go into their profile and you discover that they died 2 years before with a heart event or something. You know, you wonder why they haven't posted on Facebook. So a couple of occasions I found friends or ex-colleagues in the past that have kind of died suddenly. You know, and that seemed to be a kind of recurrent theme. And the ones that were dying suddenly, as it were, the one common denominator. that I didn't have, for instance.
But again, this you just mentioned the phrase correlation doesn't equal causation. Well, my perspective is if something's rare, if it doesn't happen very often, but if it keeps happening, rare is disqualified. Coincidences are only coincidences if they're.
But that's the kind of the counter narrative, isn't it? They keep telling us that that's what we're led to believe. We are just not a blatant whitewash.
Have you seen any other correlations, like in the nursing homes, residential
Yeah, well,
strokes in younger people,
well,
cancer in younger people?
my last job I was working in the Forest of Dean in a care home, and I was talking to the manager. This was about March or April last year, and she was a kind of former friend of mine, if you like, and she was in agreement with my concerns about these vaccinations, but she didn't stop him from coming into the home and vaccinating the residents. And all the nurses in the home were given kind of consent forms to sit down with their nominated patients to go through it. And apart from me, I wasn't given these forms. Apparently, they wouldn't allow me to have these forms. All the other nurses,
You should tell them the truth.
yeah. And so they had the so-called spring booster vaccination last year. Within 2 weeks, 7 residents had expired, had died, and the correlation was that all had boosters. And it was like April. It wasn't even like it was like off season in terms of mortality in care homes. So why would all these people suddenly die in spring? 7 deaths in less than 2 weeks. And she said, "I know it's terrible, isn't it?" That's what she said, the manager. But she was no. That's what she said. So she acknowledged that they could have been attributed to maybe not. I mean, we don't know for certain, but there was a strong evidence to suggest that was the case. But even as a manager, she said, well, she acknowledged that that could have happened, that could have been the case, but she wasn't prepared to action it. So I did, and I made a big stink. I made a big song and dance about it. And so, I parted company with that particular company, and I've got no intention of going back into any clinical setting whatsoever. I thought I'd give it one last chance last year, and I tried, and didn't work out because they want me to do like COVID training. I said, well, I'm not doing that because it's bullshit. I mean, I'm sorry, I'm not doing your COVID training. I don't, it's not my thing.
I mean, it's some pandemic, isn't it? It's gone on for 5 years now.
5 years.
Pandemics don't last 5 years anyway. Pandemics.
How long's a piece of string? Yeah. I mean, wasn't it supposed to have? We're supposed to have herd immunity within a few months or whatever. But don't even discuss that.
That's another thing. They were vaccinating people who had alleged natural immunity, so they'd recovered from COVID.
Whatever.
I mean, the first question at the Jabatoire should have been, "Hi, Doris, have you had COVID or tested positive for COVID?" Or you can lead the queue now. You've got this thing called robust natural immunity through your T memory cells. No, they're jab, and my experience of jab injuries has come from those people who've had acquired natural immunity, alleged, and I say alleged, I won't go any deeper,
whatever that
and then jabbed on top of that. So let's say that it was a real virus. If you had flu, for example, and I know you're on a different sort of pathway with that, but say if you'd had flu, you don't need to have a flu jab within a certain period of it, or at least.
Well, like I said, like 35, 38 years in nursing, I've never knowingly caught anything from anybody. This is what I'm trying to say. So what changed in 2020? I don't know. So there was no, like I said, I think at the end of the day I think so many people kind of invested in it and went with it, and the criminal aspects of it and the human rights breaches and all of this kind of stuff, the coercion, to no jab, no job. It's like basically saying to somebody, do you mind if I put my hand in your bra, and if you don't allow me to do it, you can't have your job. That's a kind of, that's basically what they're suggesting. Yeah. So, I mean, I said, look, nowhere would I comply with any of this nonsense. And you can give me that shot if you like, but you got to pull me down first. I'm not. And when I worked in the Rhondda Valley, there was some of the communities had actually banded together, and there was talk of like forced vaccinations, and they had these kind of like the local communities had formed kind of response squads, units, and if anybody came into their local community or village, there'd be a group of hardened men to sort them out, and that was actually happening in the Rhondda Valley. They were organizing into kind of like unarmed militias just in case things got even worse, So that actually did happen. I witnessed that, but obviously that wasn't reported, was it? you know.
Forced
So
vaccination. I mean, you hear
that,
stories again.
well, that's what, yeah, that's what there was coming. That's what it was kind of boiling down to. And some communities said, no, we're not going to do it. You know, like that down in down in the Rhondda, that I was talking to one or two people who were part of these groups. You know, that if they did come to town to force vaccination, there'd be a violent kind of resistance, and they were prepared to put up with that. Yeah, so people were organising at some point, but that was just to do with it. That was just propaganda, though, wasn't it? Just fear-based mind control, isn't it? Telling you this and telling you that. Then they just ignore all of it. And I think, unfortunately, I don't think this is ever going to be resolved. I've got to the point where after 5 years, there's been no real fundamental changes. There's been no huge shifts in people's opinions. I don't see a great awakening of anybody. In
Yeah.
fact, I just see a shutting down. I look around my little hometown. The people look grey, miserable, sick. And the only people that look vibrant or happy are these our migrant replacements that seem to be popping up everywhere. You know. So yeah, the general population on here is just under the absolutely crushed, I think.
You just nailed it there. You can actually pick somebody who's had 4 vaccines out against another. If you had a line of 10 people and one was unvaccinated, you'd be able to pick them out. They've got
Yeah,
a
well, probably
healthy
you're
complexion.
probably more experienced than that than me, but you just see a general kind of lack of life and energy in people, you know. And I don't know whether that's to do with that or whether just the last 5 years have been brutal, you know, not just with convid, but with other issues as well.
Yeah,
We've been
multifactorial.
battered and obliterated. We haven't had time to regroup and consider convid because we've had something else to focus on. We've had, you know, wars here, wars there, crisis here, you know, everything else just to distract you and kick the can down the road so we don't have to talk about it and address it.
Did you ever
Like I
catch
said,
monkeypox? Did you ever get monkeypox or him?
not guilty. No, not guilty. No, I'm partial to bananas, but
I had about 3 attempts at pulling that out, didn't they? When people started getting vaccine damage to quite, well, I will call it AIDS, damage to their immune systems, suddenly people were getting shingles, which is a sign that your
yeah,
immune system's damaged.
that's what,
And
yeah.
then they pulled out the monkeypox and they gave that a real good go 2 or 3 times. And even now they're building centres for monkeypox
Yeah.
vaccination in the UK, as reported by the BBC last week. I mean, who in their right mind would
I don't know.
put 2 bricks
Well,
together to build a building for monkeypox?
it's all about money, isn't it? It's just like I said. At the end of the day, it's not about ethics, is it? Or you know, it's about money essentially. And it's about the whole the deal about long COVID. Well, I thought presumably long COVID is just a strategy to hide the vaccine injured, isn't it?
It's an
There's no,
all-encompassing term. I
there's
see
no
the
such
people
thing
that
as long
vaccinated.
COVID. I mean, what the hell is that? You know, apparently myocarditis is a sign of long COVID. You know, I mean, what the hell? What they're talking about? I mean, this is nonsense. It's supposed to be a disease of no consequence, wasn't it?
Yeah,
COVID in itself.
self-limiting upper respiratory tract infection.
Yeah.
Before it was labelled with the Hollywood title of COVID-19, like Mpox and all the
If it
rest of
did
it,
exist, it was
it's
a disease of low consequence.
yeah.
And so, I
And the
mean,
day they
shouldn't
locked
it,
us down, it got downgraded, didn't it? The very day from a high to low consequence disease again. Are they just poking up? They're just taking the mickey at this point when they're locking us down when it's been downgraded to a normal seasonal illness that's self-limiting. It's just
but I
nuts.
still think, I don't know whether, I still think if, you know, if we had to replay this all over again, I still think there'd be a lot of people that still be invested in it that would go along with it. I don't think we're out the woods yet, really. But like I say, I had nothing. There was nothing. There was no. I had no skin in the game, really. Like I said, there was nothing in it for me in terms of not complying. I was just trying to protect the people I was tasked to take care of. You know, do no harm. And I just saw lots of harm being done. And weren't all these like safeguarding agencies and all? They're all at home on furlough watching Netflix. You know, I mean, it's supposed to be the whole industry around, you know, monitoring and supporting and you know these vulnerable people, but these agencies, they're just obviously toothless agency. They don't exist, do they? Really, on paper, only on
They went
paper.
home, watched a bit of Netflix, and earned
Yeah, I
10% of
mean,
their salary.
surely safeguarding should, you know. I mean, I don't any. It's just anyway. It's all pretty much.
Well, it
You
was
know,
everything, wasn't it? I mean, we'll never recover from the delays in because people were petrified to go into hospital. That's part of the reason
yeah,
they were empty, is
yeah,
because firstly, there wasn't any COVID in the hospitals, as far as the
yeah,
reports I hear are. But secondly,
mm,
that people with that 6 weeks of diarrhea, firstly, they couldn't get the bloody doctor to answer the phone. To
mm,
speak to a medical person, but they were just saying, "I don't want to bother the doctors; they're going to be so busy, you know,
yeah.
TikTok dancing." Sorry, I mean seeing patients. That would
That's the thing,
happen.
isn't it? Yeah. That's the thing in itself. I thought that TikTok thing was just mockery. And you know, the RCN, for instance, the Royal College of Nursing, a lot of people don't realise, but they took a £5 million donation from TikTok a few years ago. And as far as I'm aware, TikTok's the basically the Chinese Communist Party, isn't it? No. So they're willing to take a £5 million donation because it is a
Always
registered
follow the money,
charity.
Mike. Always follow the money. I find out that the charity that regulates the protection of the public, the GMC, a regulator, they happen to just invest in Pepsi, Nestle,
Yeah,
Merck,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
AstraZeneca. Even they're investing the
Yes,
money I
yeah.
give to them to regulate the profession, which
You didn't
actually
realise
should
it was
be.
a corporation, did you? I just
No,
thought it was.
it's
I
still
thought
no.
it was
It's
a,
openly there as a charity, but
I thought it was a governing body, but I didn't realise that they're out to make money.
But
I thought it
rather
was
than
a,
striking off those who need to be struck off, so there's a
yeah,
case last
yeah,
week about somebody
yeah,
punching a dementia patient. They should be there for
yeah,
weeding those bad eggs out or the bad
yeah,
apples or sexual offenders. Now, there's sexual offenders in this country still working as doctors.
yeah,
And meanwhile,
absolutely.
Dave Cotton's about to
I
get
know
booted.
a few. Yeah, I've met a few over
Yeah.
the years. Yeah, and they're still in. Yeah, I don't mean that lightly. Yeah. So yeah, it's all very much. It's quite depressing, really, and I hope to take something positive away from this conversation. But
Yeah.
it,
I was going to say, how do you see your future now? You mentioned exiting the
not
country state.
well, bleak, not great. I mean, I can't do the job I was, I could do relatively well. I can't do that anymore. And like I said, I'm kind of surviving on my NHS pension, and my wife works part time, and she'll be in shortly. And yeah, it's I think I'm just trying to focus on creating a happy home, really, and just you know focus a little bit on the inner self and not worry about the big picture anymore because I can't control the big picture. I can't, my attempts to, you know, prevent this from happening were completely steamrolled. I was demonized, vilified. My source of income was taken off me. All de facto, I mean, they did it like, oh, we can no longer give you any work, Mike, because of your opinions or attitude. Our clients are concerned about what you were saying and blah blah blah. Well, why should they be concerned about what I was saying? Just speaking my mind in an honest and truthful way. Trying to minimize harms that were being done at the time. So nobody was interested. I mean, I just don't get it. I don't get it. I don't recognize the world that I'm in. I didn't recognize the job that I was doing, and it's all hopefully, for me, I think, my time's pretty much spent, but, I need to kind of stay strong and focused for my son. He's 17 in March, and so I need to kind of focus on that. And I do feel guilty about, maybe I should have towed the line. Maybe I should have wore the mask and tested, blah, 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 because the only people that suffered really is me and my family.
Yeah.
But something wouldn't allow me to do that. I just couldn't get beyond that point of surrendering my values, really. And so monetarily I've suffered. Obviously I've lost a lot of money, really, but that's of no consequence because it's not important. The important thing is just trying to be true to yourself and do the right thing and just be kind to people. And I just don't see a lot of that. I don't see a lot of kindness. I don't see a lot of honesty.
Yeah.
And that's very depressing in itself. But yeah, like I say, I got not all I got from this experience is I've just been thrown on the scrap heap and derided and laughed at, and
You
that's
think you've
fine.
got? Do you think there's PTSD? Because I think I've got PTSD. I think anyone who's
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah, yeah, I think so. I think so. I've had trauma in the past. I've had very traumatic experiences in the past. But this was this was like an ongoing trauma. It was never ending, really. And I just know those residents were being butchered in their bedrooms, and I just knew it was happening. I could see it, but I thought, well, can nobody see what's going on here? People are dying here unnecessarily because they need victims, they need numbers, they need the public to be in fear. They're kind of a pandemic without victims. They need to have some victims, don't they? Yeah, I do feel slightly traumatized by it all, and the fact that so many people kind of went along with it, and I can just see how these things develop. You just have to look back in history, don't you? There's plenty of points where humanity, society lost its mind, and people suffered, and they kind of just moved on and just forgot about it. And I think this is going to be the same thing. It's an atrocity that's not going to get addressed, and we're just going to move on. There's nothing else we can
It
do.
was convenient though, wasn't it, that in your setting, in care settings, residential settings, there were no relatives allowed in for
Nothing.
arrangements
Yeah,
as
well,
well. So if
exactly.
you've got no witnesses
They
to
were
the
a
crime, the
captive.
crime didn't happen,
They were
did it?
literally they were a captive audience, and they were behind God's back, and nothing could. Nobody came into those homes, not even a GP. You know, the district nurses came in with the end of life equipment, and nobody else. You know, and that went on for quite a long time. So God knows what went on in some homes, but I can only speak of what went on in the homes I saw, and I wasn't impressed. It was shocking.
Mm.
It was vile, and it shouldn't happen, but it did happen. And I'm sure it'll happen again in some capacity.
Well, they're
I think.
lining up the next one, aren't they? Mike, just to wrap up,
Well,
really. So,
mm,
what I want to do is just ask you now. I mean, the purpose of these substacks, really, these conversations are to get
mm,
people out and speaking about it. Some really harrowing interviews we've recorded so far. Let's say
mm.
if you're talking directly to a group of 10 people that are privately messaging you saying they're awake but are absolutely petrified about speaking out, what advice would you give them to sort of get them to encourage them to speak out of their similar experience to you?
It's difficult, isn't it? I can't
You just
do as
get
I say.
a fish and whack them around the face.
Yeah. I mean, there's a. I mean, like I said, I've never hidden behind any kind of anonymity. I've always had my name on social media platforms. My name is Michael Potts, and this is me. I'm not hiding behind anything or anybody. And I think it's something you've got to. I don't know. I mean, I'm not going to say I don't have any kind of special recommendations or advice on that. You know, I think it has to come organically from the person. You know, but yeah, I think the problem is we can speak out now, but it's slightly late. I think the event happened, but the perpetrators are still at large, as it were, and bad things are still happening. You know, so yeah, it needs to be addressed. It needs to be stopped. It needs to be, there needs to be discontinuation of all of this nonsense. But I don't. I just. I don't. Like I said before, I don't see a huge awakening because I haven't seen baying mobs outside of GP surgeries yet. And that's one thing I did think I'd see, but I haven't seen any. I haven't
Mm.
seen people being running through town with torches. You know, none of that. You know, I haven't seen any kind of major kind of social unrest because of it.
I keep saying, where's the anger here? Once
Yeah,
people,
where's the
that
anger?
eureka
What?
moment,
I've
really.
been angry for 5 years.
Mm.
You know, I've been in a constant state of anger. I think it's kind of like affected me, obviously. You know, my relationship, was a lot better prior to this. You know, I've just become a very insular, angry person. You
Mm.
know, and I used to be quite a social person, really. But like I said, my faith in humanity died maybe before 2020, but it definitely, kind of that put the nail in the coffin.
Mm.
So back in 2020. So yeah, I'm still angry. I'm still angry. I might not appear to be angry, but I'm still very emotional about it.
What
And
will
I still
appease the anger? Will it be accountability and arrests?
no, I don't think it will. No, it's like South Africa, isn't it? It's like truth and reparations. There's so many people involved in it. It's going to be difficult to process everybody. You know, there's so many criminals at large and committed criminal acts against humanity, and whatever, but there's so many people involved. I said, well, where do you draw the line, and who's accountable and who's responsible? Because millions of people took part in it,
Mm.
and millions of people breached human rights and common law and God's law, if you like. So how are we going to process all of those? I
Mm.
mean, so it's like it's too many vested interests, and I think people's appetite is, they don't want to hear about it anymore. They're kind of like ad nauseum, isn't it? They've had enough of it.
Mm.
Just they want to move on, but it's hard to move on when there's still a case to be solved, isn't there?
Well, the latest is the cancer figures. I mean, numbers are numbers, aren't they? I mean, 2 years ago, the excess mortality across the world in lockstep shot up by 10 to 20%, country by
Yeah,
country. And it was the inflection point came after a certain injection went into people's arms. You know, how blatant. I mean, you can see the graphs on, there's
yeah,
videos of them where the graphs are like excess mortality and then the jab, it points to where the jab went in and
yeah,
off the
yeah.
scale across every
But
country.
no inquiry. They're not, not interested in looking at that either. Obviously, it's strange, isn't it? Very,
Whereas
very odd.
an aberrant social media post will be absolutely, inspected to the nth degree. It's just very odd. But
Yeah. yeah. But yeah, but hey ho, you know, it's some maybe
Yeah.
some good will still come of it, but I don't think so. I think
Well,
it's
I'm hoping some good will come. I've got a decent audience on X, and this is why I've kind of chose this area to
yeah.
do relaxed conversations. I mean, yeah, the last thing
So
really.
this is the first I've done, and you know,
Yeah.
I've been I've been invited to do conversations before, but I've always kind of backed out, never felt comfortable. But I saw you about 2 or 3 years ago, David. I thought that guy looks like a regular guy. He looks like he's not a bought and sold opposition. He just came over as somebody very plausible and somebody normal, you know. And I thought, well, the other kind of GP I'd like to see, you know, if that was possible. So you and all the other kind of like agents, content providers at the time were all dubious and controlled opposition, and you know wasn't sure who was who and who was playing who. But I remember seeing you thinking that guy looks like a regular bloke. You know, he's talking sense. You know, I mean, so
Yeah.
and that can raise red flags as well. It's
Yeah.
like
Well,
he's
my perspective on it, I mean, I
he's
always get
too
asked,
convincing.
is
He must
Dr.
be
X
controlled.
Y or Z? Is he controlled up? And you can't tell. Yeah,
Well,
my main principles are: what have this person lost? What have they risked here?
yeah,
And if you've lost everything and risked everything, like I've done and you've done,
yeah.
then
Well,
you're not
and you
controlled
haven't
up.
got you haven't got a studio behind you and a kind of production team, which also raises red flags, doesn't it?
I've got yeah, I've got
Yeah,
the
so anybody
kids
with that
toys and gym
shtick,
equipment.
yeah. So I learned that anybody with that kind of shtick is somebody not to be trusted, somebody polished and media savvy. You know, nah, sorry, I don't really buy into
I
that.
was
You know.
offered some media training before my first UK column interview. I said, thank you very much, but I'm okay. I'm me, and I'm,
Yeah,
as you
I
mentioned,
got,
normal bloke.
yeah, I used to listen to the UK column news, but once again, I kind of gave up on them some time ago. I had misgivings about Brian Gerrish and his background and other. They're all kind of ex armed forces and uh, intelligence agents. It's a bit of an odd kind of collection, isn't it?
Yeah, it's. I mean, they've been screaming into the abyss. I mean, it should be a
Yeah,
mainstream TV
but they've
channel,
been around for
really.
some years. I mean, UK column, they've been around 15, 20 years or something in some capacity. You know, they didn't just come on the scene when COVID started. And some of these channels like GB Resistance and things like that, they're all very suspicious. You know, the content and how they just appeared from nowhere. You know, yeah. So yeah. Like I said, like I said, I've got nothing. I do just wanted to give you the opportunity of kind of giving you a kind of brief synopsis of my experience, really.
Thank you, Mike.
Um,
That's great. I mean, we'll just wind up now if that's okay with you. But just
yeah,
one
yeah.
last thing to say really is thank you for your time. And as I mentioned,
I shall click like and subscribe, David.
sure, yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
No, if you can, yeah, that's
yeah,
where it's at. It's my
yeah,
Substack is my new future. I'm hoping to the two main reasons really are to spread the message of novel whistleblowers, as it were. You're not a novel
yeah.
whistleblower, but giving some
No,
publicity to, and secondly to become independent from
yeah,
the
yeah,
GMC. But Mike,
yeah.
thanks ever so much
Thank you,
for your
David.
time. You're
I
an
should see
absolute
my wife coming
legend.
through the door now. Yeah.
Ah,
Cheers,
bless
David.
her. All right, you take care, Mike, and
Anytime, mate.
stay in
Yeah, thanks
touch.
very much. Yeah.
All
Take
right,
care. Will
take
do.
care.
Thank you,
Bye,
David.
Mike. Bye, bye.
Bye bye. Cheers. Bye bye.